Hi everyone, I hope you're all well out there. Pattern bars, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to make a pattern bar. If you're not familiar with what a pattern bar is, it's basically just a bar of fused glass that has a consistent pattern throughout it. Great for cutting into slices and opening up to get a sort of like a butterfly effect. So the reason I'm making this is because I've got a piece in mind and I need a pattern bar for that. I'll be making it with a green theme. Now there are a bunch of techniques that you can use to make pattern bars, but today I'm going to be using the same or a very similar technique I used to make this one some time ago. I have made a piece using that, and if you go to my website you will find it there. Now this one was made by cutting strips of glass and laying them up in a very organized pattern. As you can see, it's pretty much even both sides. But the one I'm going to be making today, I'm going to lay up the strips in a very random way. So just before I get into that, if you get to the end of the video and you've found it of value to you, there is something important you can do for me to help support me on this channel. One of the things is to hit that thumbs up button down the bottom, and another is to share it on social media or to your friends. You can also subscribe, and down the bottom we have a new thanks button where you can support the channel with a small donation, and in the description down the bottom there's a link to our store on our website where you can pick up some t-shirts and mugs and things like that that have designs on them that I've come up with, and they're all related to glass fusing. So we'll get on now and make this pattern bar. Now before I get into the materials and the equipment and so forth, just need to remind you that I use Bullseye 90 COE glass. When I'm fusing on my shelf I usually use thin fire rather than kiln wash, and when I'm slumping into moulds I use boron nitride spray. So with the firing schedules, just be sure to adjust them basically for your kiln and for the COE you're using. So if you use a 96, you'll need to adjust them. Don't forget your safety. Always wear your safety glasses when you're cutting glass. Wear a mask when you're doing anything like cleaning up the thin fire off your shelf, and keep those fingers away from anything sharp. Now as far as design is concerned, I just need a small pattern bar. For what I've got in mind, I don't need a lot of material. So this is just going to be about 95 long and 50 mils wide. The pattern itself, again, I don't need anything in particular, so it's going to be fairly random. I'm going to try and make it as random as possible and get as much flow in the glass as possible. It will be a predominantly green theme, and I am going to try and get some reaction between the glasses. So what I'm going to use today are 0126, which is the spring green, as a highlight. I'm going to use 0137, which is the vanilla, 144 and 145, which are jade green and teal green. Maybe a little bit the 0112, which I think is, don't ask me, you'll have to look it up. And quite a bit of transparent. Transparent 1145, which I think is emerald green, and 1120, which is yellow. Now we will get some reaction, I hope, as long as we don't get too much, because the spring green here will react with these other greens. It does have sulfur in it, and as does the vanilla over here. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to cut a lot of little strips, 95 mils long. I'm just going to vary the width of them. And then I'm going to pile them all in there and we'll fuse it down. I don't need any particular thickness, so I'll just pile in there as much as I can and we'll fuse it down, and what it comes out will come out. As far as equipment is concerned, you will need something to dam all this up, and obviously later on I'm going to be cutting these into slices, so I'm going to use my ring saw to cut them, but you'll need something or other to cut these into slices. So I'll go now and I'll cut all the glass up into those strips, and then I'll come back and we'll basically set this up and fill it up. Okay, so this is the setup. I have my glass on either side. That's the opposing colours, so one side reacts with the other. They're all ready to go. I've got cut up pieces of kiln shelf for my dam, and I've got thin fire paper on the bottom, and I've lined this with the 3mm fibre paper. Now this fibre paper has been fired before, so it is fairly fragile, and unfortunately I cut my pieces very neat, so I'm going to be a little careful when I put them in there. Now I don't want a particular pattern, but I would like some sort of vein of colour, so I'm just going to try and aim for that rather than just little dots of colour all over the place. But how it eventually comes out, well, we'll find out in the end. Anyway, I'll lay that all up now, and then we'll get it in the kiln. Just wanted to show you something I decided to do. Because that fibre paper is fired and very fragile, I found that it's just a little bit too difficult with it being fired. So I've removed one end of it. That gives me a bit of a view into what's happening inside. Now I'll finish that off, and then I'll put the fibre paper back, and then we'll get it in the kiln. And there we go, it's all done. Got everything back together. This is going to be reasonably thick. I think it's probably going to end up about, say, 20 mils thick, 3/4 of an inch. And because of that, I will have to give it a bubble squeeze on the way up, try and get out all the bubbles, and on the way down on the anneal cycle, give it quite a long anneal. I'm probably going to err on the positive side. Is that the right way of putting it? But anyway, I'm going to make that anneal period quite long. So it's going to be in the kiln for quite a while. So I'll get in the kiln now and get it started. Okay, it's all fused up, and as normal, we've got these little jaggy bits along here, if you can see them. They're caused from the fibre paper being higher than the level of the glass, so it tends to pull up through surface tension, I believe. If we had the fibre paper just below, we'd get a rounder edge on it like we've got there. I don't think it would get rid of all of them, but yeah, it does help. In this case, of course, I couldn't do that because I didn't know what the final depth of this will be. So I have to clean those up. I'll grind them up on my grinding wheel, get rid of those before we go any further. Then what I'll do on my ring saw is cut the end off, and we'll see what our pattern is like. Now the final thickness of this, I guessed it to be about 20, and it has come out at, let me hold it there, oops, not inches, 21.5, 22, so pretty close. I didn't get as much reaction as I thought I'd get, but we'll have a look at the slice when I take it off, and we'll just see. So this is a grinding wheel I'm going to use to take those little jaggy bits off around there. You can probably see them a lot clearer now. So I'll just get those off, and then we'll head over to the to the saw and cut a slice off. So this is my ratty old tile saw that I modified a number of years ago. I'd dearly love to have a better saw than this one, but can't afford it. This one, I had to put a thinner blade in than the really thick blade and coarse blade that was in here, because it was intended for tiles, not glass, and you need a thinner blade, otherwise it's going to chip this too much. I've also I've got an old tile, vinyl tile, and put that on here rather than having the metal top. I didn't particularly like the metal top. And that had a different arbor, so I had to worry about that as well. So I had to worry about a few things with this. It's about as accurate as not having a guide. So the guide is very difficult to set up, but it sort of works. So we'll take off just a thin slice off the end here, just so we can see what the pattern is. Okay, well that was a disaster. That old saw is hard to work with at the best of times, but when it's got a blunt blade it's exceptionally hard to work with, and that blade is stuffed and I don't have a spare one. So I'm back to my trusty old ring saw, but the problem is that this is probably 1 mil too thick for this with the guide on. So I've had to take the guide off to do this. Not something that's recommended, because we don't want movement in that blade, it'll wreck the blade and a few other things. So I'm going to have to be very careful and cut this slice off. So I'm going to have to get myself another saw at some point. Anyway, we'll get on and cut this slice off now. Okay, I have purposely not looked at the cut side of this so that we can both see it together. By the way, if you hear some noise in the background, that's Anne over there, she's making some jewellery. So I'll open it up for you. Actually, I'll wet it first, and so we can see what it looks like. Well, I'm happy with that. I think it's worked out fine. That's pretty much what I was hoping to get. No bubble, so the bubble squeeze has worked. Not a lot of transparency in there. That's why I got the white sheet there, but can't really see much. Might have to hold it up to the light. A little bit of the yellow there, but that's about it. I'll just hold it up to the light. So there is some transparency there, but it is fairly dark, so I'm not too sure how it's going to come out in my final piece. Probably should have used a lighter green. So the mirror pattern looks good. Actually, I just realised something. Turn it around here. We got an arrow on the bottom. I think it looks good that way. It's going to make the final piece quite interesting, actually. So what do you reckon? Did that work out? I think it did. For me, that's pretty much what I was looking for. A little bit more transparency may have been good, but I don't think it matters a great deal. I think for the piece I'm making, this is going to be fine. There is a lot of colour in that, and it is quite busy. If you're going to make one, maybe you don't want it quite so busy, reduce the number of colours. And the reaction that I was looking for, it's there, but it's not it's not really dominant in any way. Obviously, if you just made that using something like turquoise and vanilla, you would have had a much more complex reaction. So just a reminder, there's a couple of suggested videos up there. Please consider supporting me by using that thanks button down the bottom, making a little donation, or going and buying a t-shirt or something like that. And share the video around, put it on social media, send it to your friends, any help at all. And until the next video, I'll say bye for now.